in their limbs a white hair, and swift as the swallow that flies through the air. You may trap the world over, but none to compare to the pride of old Cregan, that bonny white hair. One clear autumn morning, as he will suppose, over in golden sun o'er the green mountain rose, Barney Conway came down and he did declare, oh, this day I'll put an end to the bonny white hair. So he searched through the lowlands and down through the glens, all among the wild ditches where the white hair did ends, till at last coming down over the heather so fair, from behind the wild thistle out jumps the white hair. Bang, bang went his guns and his dongs he slipped to, as swift as the wind o'er the green mountain flew. But his dongs soon came back and it made Barney sigh, for he knew that the white hair had bid him goodbye. And we're some jolly sportsmen down here from Pomeroy, from Cookstown, Dungannon, and likewise the Moy. With our pedigree greyhounds we travel from far, and we've come down to Cregan in our fine motor car. Oh, well, into the lowlands these huntsmen did go, in search of the white hair they'd look high and low, till at last Barney Conway from a bog bank so rare shouted out to the huntsmen, there lies the white hair. So they called up their greyhounds from off the green lea, Barney and the huntsmen all tied with glee. It was there on the bog bank all gathered around, 7 dogs and 9 men did that poor hare surround. Oh, no wonder that her white hair did tremble with fear, as she stood on her hind legs she would raise her big ears. As she stood on her hind legs with one gallant spring, she jumped over the greyhounds and broke through the ring. Well, that's
all right, we are going to start. I will play that song again at the end. That is The Cregan Right Hair by Derry Farrell. And if you're going to ask why do I always use that song, it's because can't get copyrighted for it. That's about it. Anyway, we're going to talk about a number of issues today. So we're going to do an overview of the whole week. I don't do daily videos by any means anymore. I will try to sort of break this up a little bit by stopping the recording in the meantime every once in a while and then restarting it, and then we'll basically upload the smaller topic videos to BitChute, Rumble, and Odyssey at some point. Hopefully today, but we'll see. I want to remind you to subscribe on all those platforms, BitChute, Rumble, and Odyssey below, and you can follow me on Gab and Minds. And I'm going to talk about a few topics to here on this live stream. We're going to talk about Biden and his summit with Putin, which concluded, I think, at the end of last week, and just the utter embarrassment of having a person like him. We might get into, at some point, some of the newer stories that are just popping up today. There was Kamala Harris did visit the border and apparently got a hilarious welcome from people who called her Que mala, as in that means how awful in Spanish. And we're also going to talk about the very briefly about the infrastructure plan. The agreed bipartisan infrastructure plan for now is basically dead in the water until Biden can figure out a way to get the Republicans back on board. Now, don't get me wrong. It is possible, unlike many other bills, for it to pass without Republican support. The question is whether Biden will be willing to accept a bill like that, or whether they can get it passed like that just with Democrats. Also going to address a little bit of the John McAfee death, which people are calling into question whether it was a suicide, as well as the Second Amendment statement that Biden said about how Americans may need nuclear weapons in order to actually make the Second Amendment matter. I think that's what he was trying to say. And one second, there's also... Okay, here we go. So that is... I just want to put these in order. And we're going to talk a little bit about how nations that supposedly have better healthcare systems than the U.S., and I'm certainly not saying that our healthcare system is something to be proud of, because it isn't. But people who have been calling for years for a healthcare system similar to Europe's or similar to especially Sweden, we're going to talk a little bit about how those have not really addressed the coronavirus pandemic the way that you would think a top-notch healthcare system would. And then we're going to go a little bit more into depth on what will end up being a separate video when it gets uploaded after the live stream, about the Sam Seder and H3 versus Steven Crowder debate, which I found I found it to be an interesting topic. YouTube drama normally, I think, is just people chasing each other's clout. I think in this case it was also that, but it was still interesting as insofar as people started to line up as to whether they think that Crowder was the coward or whether they think that Ethan Klein and Sam Seder were the cowards or weasels or whatever. And then we're going to talk about the Carl Nassib affair and how people are struggling to react to the first openly gay active NFL player, which in my mind is not really a story, but it bears talking about. So the first one, of course, that we're going to talk about is Joe Biden. Last week he was in Moscow, or actually, let me see here. This was at a NATO meeting, so it was definitely not in Moscow. It was in Geneva. So this is what happens after he's asked whether he still thinks Putin is a killer.
Laughed at the suggestion that you had called him a killer. Is that still your belief, sir, that he is a killer?
To answer the first question, I'm laughing too. They actually, well, look, I mean, he has made clear that the answer is, I believe he has in the past essentially acknowledged that he was, there are certain things that he would do or did do. But look, when I was asked that question on air, I answered it honestly. But it's not much of a, I don't think it matters a whole lot in terms of this next meeting we're about to have. And if you violate the agreement you made, then quote, the treaty's off. I'm hoping that that President Putin concludes that there is some interest in terms of his own interest in changing the perception that the world has of him in terms of whether or not he will engage in behavior that's more consistent with what is considered to be appropriate behavior for head of state.
He can't stand behind the words that he said about Vladimir Putin. That's what's so maddening about Joe Biden and how he is running away from everything that he said before, because in this context, he has to appear to have something to get from Vladimir Putin that's within reach. So he can't stand behind calling him a killer, which he did. And he also has to make up some sort of absurd criteria that he was saying he was applying to Putin for him to get back into the realm of respectability on the international arena. And let's understand this. If you call someone a killer, how do you earn your way back into respectability? The act of murder is irreversible. And people who morally judge someone like Putin to be a murderer or a killer or whatever, they should be prepared to stand behind that judgment. Now, my personal perspective, I know that there's people in my audience who disagree, is I don't care if Vladimir Putin is an awful human being in whatever sense, because there's nothing we can do about who runs Russia. It's basically a situation we have to deal with as reality. Unfortunately, Russia isn't necessarily a country we want to live in. But that doesn't mean that we have to, make absurd statements about them and then fail to back them up, as Joe Biden has. And it's something that I think it's indicative of his character. You have to remember that Donald Trump called Kim Jong-un the Rocket Man and then basically bullied him to the negotiating table and was able to at least get a couple summits and lower tensions on the Korean Peninsula, and even got the Korean Peninsula the closest that it ever was to real peace during his time. Unfortunately, it didn't get completed, but certainly Donald Trump knew how to deal with an egotistical dictator, because the North Koreans didn't really get anything from him, right? Apart from a couple meetings. With Joe Biden, he basically has yielded to Putin real tangible things. He's yielded to him the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and he has also yielded to him basically that the United States is not necessarily going to open more fronts in Syria. It's not going to become more active in Syria than it already is, meaning that they're not going to pursue actively regime change against Assad. So all of those are preconditions that Putin got from Biden without even having a meeting yet. And then they did have the meeting, and this is the result, that you have Biden, actually this was before the meeting, but Biden was basically unwilling to stand by the words he'd said before, because he's a huge coward. That's the person he is. And the meeting itself, from what I can remember, I was listening to a lot of radio clips of it, Putin basically mocked the United States the entire time, deservedly so. He was saying that most of the cyber attacks in the world originate from the United States in response to Biden's criticism over cyber attacking and hacking of U.S. infrastructure. He also was, he would dance around every single topic and not commit to anything and say that everything is, and basically he said that he didn't remember Biden telling him at one point that he has no soul. And that means that he is calling Joe Biden, without saying so, he's calling him a liar. So you can see this is something that I will stand by this, okay? And that Joe Biden is a person who has no real backbone to him, no substance. Vladimir Putin does. And it shows that their caliber of character is so different that nobody can ever dispute that this was definitely not the way that Biden was sold by the media and by foreign policy experts who said that, he would be this courageous fighter against the tyranny of Putin, and he would set him right and everything. He hasn't set him right. In fact, Putin is probably more powerful than he has been at any point in his time in office, which I'm certainly not someone who is interested in getting into more conflicts with Russia. I've always said we should probably normalize relations a little more and de-escalate tensions, unlike what both Biden and Trump, as well as Obama, have said. But Putin is definitely getting stronger. He's actually strengthening his ties with Xi Jinping and the Chinese. Seiler is saying, bold, thanks for that info. Can't wait to tell that to my Biden voting Mexican family. So let me see if I can actually find the clip, because it was on earlier. I found it on Rumble. So, one second. Or it might have been here. I can find it. Okay, so this is not a very long clip, but she visited the border, and this was a welcome committee of, I mean, they're obviously Trump supporters, but it's pretty funny.
They don't want you. Go back. Go back. You don't have to.
So yeah, there's signs that say Kamala hates Mexicans. And I would say that it's really, that's the way that I think you ought to respond to these people, because they don't have actual compassion for people who are reaching our borders, who whatever the motives are. And I certainly am a huge opponent of illegal immigration, but you do have to respond to them with direct mockery and tell them, if you're Hispanic, or if you're whatever you are, if you're white, if you're black, if you're if you're one of these religions, right? Like, let's say that you're Hindu or whatever, and you don't like these people, you have to say they don't represent you. And I applaud these people for doing this.
Good morning, America. This is Irene Armendariz Jackson in El Paso, Texas, and I'm here to say, Kamala, you came a little too late. We have had this crisis for years. We need solutions. We don't need you parading in the Border Patrol station or acting like you care. Americans matter. America matters. God bless you, America.
All right, so that was the first story about Putin and Biden, and I added in the whole Kamala Harris at the border thing. She's also, I think they asked her, and I'm not going to play the clip unless maybe I have a little bit of time at the end, but they also asked her, by the way, the press did, why she waited so long to get there. And she said, oh, we haven't waited long at all. We were planning to come here in March and we couldn't. And it was just such a disingenuous answer, because she's been other places since then. She actually went to Central America. It's much easier to go to El Paso, Texas, than it is to Guatemala. For one thing, for those of you that are unaware, if an American senior official like Kamala Harris, especially somebody in the executive branch, in the president's, in the White House, if they are going overseas, typically the Secret Service has to have massive preparation. They have to go there and find and establish relationships with the local security people or with U.S. forces that are there if it's a war zone, and make sure that it's a secure area for them to go to. Now, obviously, they have to do the same thing in El Paso, Texas, but it's a lot simpler to do that than it is to do it in Guatemala, as she did do. And in point of fact, the visit to Guatemala was a huge embarrassment. The leadership there didn't really get along with her, and it was a disaster, in my opinion. Okay, so the second story. So these are going to be like shorter news stories I'm going to go through. By the way, the Derek Chauvin sentence, it came down, I think, 20 minutes before I started the stream, or maybe it was an hour, I don't remember. But he did get, I believe, it says 22 and a half years in prison. So maybe if you guys want to put in the comments whether you think he'll actually serve 22 years, let me know, or if you think it'll be overturned, or if he'll die in prison, which I think would be a very likely outcome. Go ahead. GOP senators reject Biden tying bipartisan infrastructure deal to bigger spending package. This is something that I feel the GOP, they still are in the mindset of being the permanent part of government that they've always been. Right? Instead of being a group that seeks to change the nation, change the government, change the way that Americans live according to a vision. They're part of the permanent leadership of the country. And that's the whole problem, because they are to blame for a lot of the problems that we're in. A lot of the same people who are still in government, like Joe Biden, by the way. Joe Biden calling Putin a killer. He's somebody who has started wars in Iraq and Libya, supported a dirty war in Syria. This is a dirty war. People on the left also call it that. People on the right call it that. Joe Biden is just as bloody of a person as Vladimir Putin in my mind. But anyway, the people like Lindsey Graham, who reached an infrastructure deal and then backed out of it with President Biden, they shouldn't have even bothered. They should have just said, we have an infrastructure deal. We're not interested in these negotiations with Chuck Schumer or with Joe Biden or anything, because we can see the contents of what they want in the bill, and we don't want anything to do with that. Things that are, whether it is a lot of the wasteful infrastructure they're talking about, or a lot of the pork barrel spending that they want to put into it, such as this human infrastructure stuff like childcare and housing, which isn't, look, people know that infrastructure means bridges, tunnels, it means power stations, it means, and those actually are in some cases better than giving housing and childcare, because the people who work on that infrastructure, they get the contracts and the money to feed into the economy, so to speak. Now, it's still wasteful because of the way Washington does it, and prevailing wage laws and all of the different set-asides that you have to go through. So there's no infrastructure bill that I, as a person who is against wasteful spending, can really get behind. But you see that the people that are on Capitol Hill, you have Rob Portman, who's my senator here in Ohio, who is leaving office next year. You have Mitt Romney, who's just always been a giant clown. And you have Lisa Murkowski in the background. You can barely see her neck and face here. Those are the types of people who are part of the GOP negotiation group. And it's pretty fitting that those are people that they have no real substance behind them. They're very they're weather vanes. That's the way that I would describe all of them. They're pathetic people. Rob Portman is not as bad as Mitt Romney because he doesn't take as many public stances as he does, but he's always been a person who's very wishy-washy and goes back and forth on issues, and then comes up with some ridiculous speech about how he was compelled through his conscience and things like that. Look, if you're not compelled by your conscience when you get into office through some real beliefs that you have, then you should resign, right? If you're not, you should be compelled by your conscience when you start, not by things that people foist on you when you're already in office. And that's the type of person that Rob Portman is. It is also the way that Mitt Romney's always been. These are people, by the way, that they still, if you look through the histories of all the GOP senators and all the GOP, the people who became the Never Trumpers, the people who are rhinos, and you went back to the era before 2015, and you looked at their record on gay marriage, they would be considered basically bigots by the left, people who are Neanderthals, who are Bible thumpers and all of that, right? And yet nowadays they're like, oh, but these Democrats, we can reach across the aisle and shake hands with them and everything. There's no shaking hands with people who would consider you to be primitive Neanderthals, right? And for many of them, that they say, oh, we changed our attitude on it. People like Rob Portman, for that. That's why I'm bringing it up. Suddenly you don't believe in the scripture. Suddenly you don't believe in the doctrines that for many years you said were so important, or in the sanctity of the family or whatever. It's a weasel move. And I think that it shows kind of the weakness of the GOP and the weakness of the people who consider themselves conservatives, because either you do believe in the scripture or you don't. I think that it's you can also be agnostic about it. That's one place to be. But if you're a person who got elected saying that you're this believing Christian and everything, and suddenly you're doing deals with these people who are constantly trying to do more abortions. They're trying to do more gender politics and more justification of the transgender agenda and things like that. No, then I think that you're a total fraud, and that's what I think most of the Republican Party is, unfortunately. See here. So I think somebody sent me a message about my music choice, but I'll have to listen to it later. Anyway, the joggers will never be satisfied, says I am so. I don't remember what that's a reference to. I know joggers is a meme for something. So Biden has also taken the heat for using the word Latinx and explaining why the population is slow to get vaccinated. And then the same thing. So this I wasn't originally planning to put this in, but he apparently said that one of the reasons that black people are hesitant to get the vaccine is because of the Tuskegee syphilis study, except that he muddled that with the Tuskegee Airmen, which is not the same thing. The Tuskegee Airmen, who were black pilots who served in World War II, are not. I think I know what it is. I am Sylar, but I'm not going to say what I think it is because whatever. But I think I know what it is. I just don't want to make a mistake. Anyway, the Tuskegee Airmen, they served in World War II. They were pilots. I think they were based out of Tuskegee. That was really there was a Air Force base there, and they were called the Red Tails. They didn't have anything to do with the Tuskegee syphilis study. But Joe Biden, who basically everything sort of, this big bowl of mush for him that he eats every morning and his wife spoon feeds into his mouth, everything's the same. So yes, he confused both of those, and then he also used Latinos, or Latinx. He won't say Latino or Latina anymore because the person who once mocked Indian Americans by saying that every 7-Eleven in Delaware has an Indian with a funny accent. Now suddenly he's Mr. Sensitive. So yeah, that also happened today. So I can't keep up. John McAfee, really quick, condolences to the family. As somebody who in 2016 I was considering voting for the Libertarian Party, he definitely made the debate worth watching. I think at one point he started to debate what governing even means, like the definition. He was hilarious. He was really one of the most colorful people ever to be involved in politics, and I think he was truly, a weird person, but also a very interesting guy. And I think he was one of the people who was willing to tear off the cover on this notion that politics is about respectability and dignity and everything. It isn't. A lot of these people are just, they make a mockery of the countries that they lead, or even the states that they lead. If you see people, I've spent some time in the New York, New Jersey area, and the way that the city is run, and you can see also the city of New York, and the way that you can just see how it's just not being maintained. There's no sanitation there. And then you see people like Bill de Blasio. He had this interview the other day where he was waxing poetic about how you get into office and you have all these lofty ideals, and then you realize at the end that it's not about that. It's about, it's about being true to yourself or something, and all this stuff. Meanwhile, his city is basically falling apart. I think John McAfee, maybe he wouldn't have been a great president. He was a presidential candidate, but he was a great person to expose what the presidential, nomination process is about. Like the LP, the Libertarian Party in 2016, they went with Gary Johnson, a person who had been elected. He basically turned the Libertarian Party into a vehicle for open borders and pro-drug propaganda. And it's not like, first of all, I'm a person, I am for drug legalization. I don't think that we need to pander to people by waving pot leaves in front of their faces. That's one thing. The other thing I want to say about John McAfee is yes, I think that it is deeply suspicious that he died in prison after nobody knew that he was there. It's deeply suspicious that somebody who's said many, many times that he would not kill himself turned out dead in a prison cell in Spain. So with all that being said, I think that this is a story that's going to add to the whole sorry saga of what happened with Jeffrey Epstein, and also with, unfortunately, Julian Assange, who remains basically prisoner X in the United Kingdom, a person who is being denied justice permanently because the people in charge, the intelligence agencies, who they don't care about the laws, they don't care about the real liberties and civil, well, those would be called civil liberties and human rights that the media claims to be about. Those agencies could care less about them. And now most of the media is trying to get people to trust those agencies, trying to get people to say, you don't need to listen to the people who are there to safeguard your liberties, who are there to fight for your right to representation, fight for your rights as an accused person, your presumption of innocence. They're not there for that. They never have been, the media, because you've seen it through the Me Too movement, through passing judgment on people like Derek Chauvin, who, I don't think he was guilty of murder, and like, for instance, Julian Assange, who was accused wrongly of rape. They don't really care whether you are innocent or not. They care whether you are on their side or not. And that's really where the left-right divide means nothing. Because there were many Republicans who were willing to see these people like Julian Assange locked up forever based on their interpretation of how he violated intelligence community statutes and things like that. There's no justification for what happened to Assange. There's no justification for what happened just the other day to John McAfee. And we're basically seeing that this is the boot coming down on dissent. And it happens more often than we think, right? And believe me, this story is going to be buried pretty soon. So I think these two other stories I'm not going to get to today. Another story that happened, you have Sheldon Whitehouse, the senator from Rhode Island, has defended his membership in an all-white beach club in Rhode Island. There's a video of him trying to defend it, and it just shows how idiotic the people who are, it's the people who belong to parties, who affiliate with parties, who think parties represent them and represent their ideals. This is a guy, he represents one of the 100 most powerful people in the country, right? The U.S. Senate, now granted that their power is limited because there's 99 people canceling out their vote, but he's a U.S. senator. He probably will never be voted out of office because Rhode Island is such a hard blue state. The only hope would be for somebody on the left to primary him, which is not really, it's not in the offing right now. So Black Lives Matter of Rhode Island PAC said that Senator Sheldon Whitehouse declined to push to diversify the all-white Bailey's Beach Club shows where his priorities lay. So that's as harsh of a statement as they will say. That's how pathetic it is that Black Lives Matter, which all the time it complains about there not being enough black people in anything. If your picnic area doesn't have enough people of the right color, they're very, very pissed off. But a sitting senator who is part of one of these beach clubs that has no black people at all, they issue this mild statement, right? They basically say, oh, we don't really like what he did. That shows how much of a paper tiger the BLM movement really is. So yeah, that's what's happening with Rhode Island and their senator. And by the way, this is the Boston Globe. I get email updates from the Boston Globe. Normally, I would get an email update if it was some other scandal. Like anytime a police officer is involved in anything mildly, misconduct, whether it's financial misconduct or anything, I get the email. For some reason, I'm signed up for Boston Globe updates. I don't remember why. This never crossed my email feed, so I had to go look it up. I Am Siler says, wonder why BLM Rhode Island won't burn down the whites only club. Yeah, I mean, that's their answer for everything else. By the way, if you watch the Salty Cracker channel, it's worth it sometimes because he did an analysis on how the George Floyd statue in Newark has already been vandalized. So people who, for many years, they were like, oh, we have to take down statues of bigots and racists and whatever. Well, they put up a statue of their own, right? And the people who, until now, have been tearing down statues and talking about how statues of bigots and evil people should be vandalized or destroyed, well, now they're pissed off that somebody vandalized and defaced their own statue. So that's exactly the way that group of people behaves, the activist group. People who for many years they've called for all norms of society to be eliminated. Now they are calling for those norms to be enforced on people they don't like. Ophir is saying, shill the new channel, we need subs and shares. So I know that I Am Sylar might have an interesting take on this channel that Ophir has, which I've been on. It's called Juminati. And basically, I work with some other people on it. I'm not really the person in charge of it, but I have been on a couple of their streams. And what they do is they analyze a number of clips from pundits on the left and the right of the Israel-Palestine conflict and sort of, address some of the misstatements by members of that group. For example, we did one. Ophir is saying Ray is a big part of it, me. So I would say I'm a huge part of it, but yeah, I've been on what, 2 streams or something. So I Am Sarler says I already like the sound of it. So yes, Ophir, expect him to be trolling in the next stream because I think Sylar is a big fan of Nick Fuentes, and so let me see if I can find the channel's URL at some point. You know what? 1 second. Yeah, so Ophir, you can put the link to the channel in the chat because I don't have time to look for it. But go ahead. I actually had a spicy debate with Ophir on the Nick Fuentes stream if you want to listen to it. Sylar is saying, hell no. No, I bet you would troll it, though. But, I mean, it's up to you. Anyway, gonna pause the recording for a second because we have a new major topic. So the next issue I want to discuss, we've talked a lot about healthcare issues. A lot of the reason that I started doing YouTube was because in 2016, that was the height of the debate during the presidential election over what would happen with Obamacare. The Democrats wanted to strengthen and fortify it and build on it, so to speak. That was their language, which was dishonest, by the way. Obamacare happens to be corporate welfare. Those people who are in favor of universal health care, at least they believe in a real viewpoint instead of a fake viewpoint, instead of some sort of hybridized garbage like Obamacare was. But Obamacare is largely, it survived mainly because the Trump administration scuttled the individual mandate, right? So it has survived mainly because it's been streamlined and simplified a little bit. But it was still a bad policy. It was wrong to keep the policy in place. I think it's one of the major failures of the Trump administration not being able to eliminate Obamacare during his first 2 years in office when the GOP ran the House and the Senate. There were a lot of Republican senators who were jelly-kneed, and they bowed before the media and said, oh, no, we're going to keep Obamacare. The foremost among them was John McCain, who's one of the greatest frauds of all time. Anyway, so the reason I'm bringing this up is that universal health care is going to always be the golden calf of the left. And the reason it is because here in the United States, at least, okay, I know in other countries you already have universal health care. Some of you live in the UK, or you live in I do have a viewer in India. So anyway, so we are not Ben Shapiro. I'm not Ben Shapiro. I'm speaking myself. I'm certainly not him. But by the way, if you are a fan of Ben Shapiro, that's fine with me, but I can't stand him. Okay, I would never, he's just an annoying person. But in any case, yes, you can sub, and if you want to maybe send your comments, or you can find my email. I think my email is actually in the description. Yes, the video description. You can also subscribe to my newsletter, by the way. It's in the video description. Let me just put it in the chat as well. So you can subscribe to the newsletter, which happens usually, I think it's twice a month or something, twice a month or once a month. So we're not spamming you all the time. Okay, so Venezuela has received its first shipment of Cuban coronavirus vaccine. So just to be clear here, I acknowledge that it might be that there are other obstacles besides their universal healthcare system for why Venezuela took so long to receive coronavirus vaccine. The other thing I want to say is I am not one of these people who's going to tell you that you have to get the vaccine. I'm also not going to give you an opinion on whether you should or shouldn't, right? I'm just saying that this is an issue of distribution and the effectiveness of the healthcare system. And Venezuela, a country that is basically the model for how awful this state-run system is, now they're receiving their first doses of the vaccine. So it says here, Venezuela received its first shipment of doses of leftist ally Cuba's Abdala coronavirus vaccine on Thursday, the South American country's vice president said, while slamming wealthy countries for sabotaging the COVAX vaccine sharing scheme. So basically what they're saying is all the countries that they hate, that they've called imperialist Yankee oppressors for many years, now they're complaining that they won't share vaccine with them. Well, I thought that the whole point of being a socialized economy with a vanguard party and everything was so you could be independent of the capitalist system around you. I didn't think it meant that other countries that you hate owe you the help that you demand, even after you hate us for so many years. So another thing is, authorities did not specify how many doses had arrived from Cuba, but did say that Venezuela had signed a contract to purchase 12 million doses of the shot. Cuba said earlier this week that the 3-shot Abdala vaccine had proved 92.28% effective in last-stage clinical trials. Whatever. This is true international cooperation, the brotherhood and friendship that we must demonstrate and be an example for other governments. So to be clear, Venezuela is still dependent on another country. It just happens to be another country that is not the United States. They're dependent on other countries, even though they, for many years, they were saying, oh, we're going to be more self-sustainable. We're not going to be part of the Yankee empire, the Gringo empire, or whatever. So anyway, President Nicolas Maduro's government in April said it had paid the COVAX initiative intended to facilitate vaccine access to poor countries for 5 million doses, which have not yet arrived. Officials said earlier this month that 4 of its payments had been blocked. Rich countries have sabotaged this solidarity mechanism to distribute vaccines to the world, Rodriguez said. Rich countries try to use the vaccines as an instrument of political blackmail. Her comments came after Reuters reported on Wednesday that COVAX, co-led by the World Health Organization, was planning a reorganization to prioritize poor countries, citing internal WHO documents. So they're lambasting the World Health Organization. As we all know, the U.S. doesn't dominate the WHO. It's really China. China is the country that's denying Taiwan any membership. China is the country that has its hooks in Dr. What's his name? Peter Daszak, who's the person behind EcoHealth Alliance that was helping to fund the gain of function research in Wuhan, China. It really is. It's so delusional, and then they blame the United States for it. Yes, the people to blame here in the United States are the ones who are beholden to countries like China, right? So I would say that this is indicative of a country. Their own system is a failure. So now what are they doing? They're depending on the deficient system of Cuba, which is another communist country, to bail them out. And they're blaming the country that they've always hated for their failure. Another thing is, so again, I know some of you live in Europe, some of you live in the UK. The UK happened to have a good distribution scheme. Again, not saying that you should take the vaccine or you shouldn't take the vaccine. I'm just talking about the distribution system. So if the distribution system, meaning that if you want to take the coronavirus vaccine, do you have access to it? Do you have the chance to take it? Because here in where I live, if you wanted to take the vaccine, you had a chance, I think, as early as April to get it, even if you were not within the target ages. So where Europe went wrong in its vaccine rollout, and why? While Washington went to business with the drug companies, Europe was more fiscally conservative and trusted the free market. That's a misreading of what actually happened. It happens to be that Europe had just the same sort of corporate welfare relationship with AstraZeneca as the United States had with Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson, which, by the way, I think those companies, they all make other things that are probably, useful products. But I don't appreciate it when people are being pushed to take a pharmaceutical by entertainers, by people who, in their own lives, they live very unhealthy existences, and they have self-destructive habits. People like James Corden, who is just a joke of a human being, and is not funny in any other way. So my personal opinion is that the propaganda is really the problem. The vaccine itself, I think people have to do their own research and see, is this something that is something that should be their priority or not? Because there are always people who, for whatever reason, shouldn't take a specific medication or inoculation or any other foreign substance they put in your body or get a surgery. It's so irresponsible to see these people just push the vaccine as the cure-all for everyone. And continuing to talk about it, just like Anthony Fauci. And by the way, most of those people would like our system to be much more like Cuba or like the European Union, where everything comes from the top to the bottom, and all the decisions are made in some meeting room in one of these bureaucratic buildings somewhere, and you don't get to see any of the process of how this is decided, and the documents are FOIA proof, and you never get to see them. Everything is in secret. They don't believe in transparency because they believe, and this is going to come up later because we're going to talk about the Crowder and H3 issue. If you're a person who you believe that the authorities have your best interest in mind because they have better knowledge than you, then yeah, you deserve the effects of what's going to happen, right? You have to have the inquisitive nature to go out there and find out whether you're being fed horse shit or not. And then to add to that, I also brought up, this is something I've been saving on my screen for months. This was in April. Canada's vaccine mess. And They actually asked the question. This is the Atlantic. It isn't InfoWars. It isn't Breitbart. It isn't Gateway Pundit. It isn't any of those. It's the Atlantic. It's as mainstream as it gets. And they're saying Canada has universal health care and millions of doses on order. So why are so few of its citizens vaccinated? So April 6, 2021, by the time you read this, at least a quarter of Americans will have received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. It's a stunning turnaround for a country where a bungled early response, inadequate financial support to keep people home, and a mishmash of mask requirements have led to more than 30 million infections and more than 554,000 deaths. Just north of the border, Canadians, usually so smug about our universal health care, are looking on with jealousy. Here, vaccine envy has turned into a national psychosis, another reason to beat ourselves up for some fatal national flaw, wrote Alan Freeman, a journalist turned public servant and academic on iPolitics, a Canadian news website. In the Globe and Mail, the columnist Ian Brown retells an encounter with a vaccinated person. I immediately want. So this is his impression. This is his reaction to meeting somebody with a vaccine. He says, I immediately want revenge. Nothing serious. Steal his car, maybe, or his wallet. Canadians have been overwhelmingly compliant with public health directives, wearing masks, limiting social interactions, washing and sanitizing our hands till our fingertips prune. And what do we get? Per capita vaccination numbers lagging behind those of 50 other countries, including Brazil, Chile, Turkey, and much of Europe, according to Johns Hopkins University's immunization tracker. The country currently has a level 4 travel advisory. Travelers should avoid all travel to Canada, warns the CDC. By the way, that's bullshit. I know people who go back and forth to Canada all the time. Unfortunately, it takes them forever to get in because of the ridiculous testing that you have to do. But they come and go and they're fine. They don't seem to be keeling over and dying. So this is all for nothing, is what I'm trying to say. 1 second. So in March, the Department of Homeland Security announced that the U.S.-Canada border closed for nearly a year, right? Unlike a different border, since American COVID-19 infection rates began escalating out of control, would remain closed for at least another month, mostly because of Canada now. I think we have nothing to be proud of on this, that's for sure. Andre Picard, a health expert in Canada and a longtime columnist for the Globe and Mail, told me. So these are people who, to be clear, this article is a Canadian journalist interviewing Canada's other journalists about Canada's deficient vaccine. So these are people within the Canadian media acknowledging that their system failed massively on the coronavirus vaccine distribution, which for the last time. So I know some people might come back. I don't have that many people who scrutinize me hard, but this is how much I care. I'm not saying that the vaccine is essential to your health personally, right? But the idea was that universal health care would allow access to cutting-edge health care for all people for free, right? And in this time of crisis, a world crisis, right? So every single system is being tested as to its readiness to respond to a healthcare emergency. It seems to be that Canada, the European Union, and Venezuela and Cuba, they're way, way far behind the United States, and that's bad because, first of all, they like to say the progressives that the U.S. healthcare system is in shambles compared to Europe's. It's not in shambles compared to Europe's. It's a problem in and of itself, but it's not because it is not universal health care. The problem is that we have such a, we have so many entitlements here. We have Medicaid, we have Medicare, and we have Obamacare. All of this money being funneled by the government to healthcare providers in order to pay for the low-cost healthcare that the people who are working, who get insurance and pay for their insurance premiums are getting much higher in order to compensate for that, because those companies and healthcare providers, they want to be able to make an actual profit. And unfortunately, I think they're able to make a killing on the people who do pay for their health care. All right. So, let me see here. Let's get rid of some of these stories. So we've already done, to review, Biden versus Putin and the infrastructure deal, John McAfee, Venezuela and the coronavirus. So the next story we're going to talk about really quick is this issue with Joe Biden basically saying that you don't need the Second Amendment because it's not going to matter. You're going to need nukes, or you're going to need jet fighters like F-16 fighter planes in order to actually do something to overthrow the government. And people are pointing out the irony in this, which is that for months and months and months, the these Democrats and the media around them and some Republican losers have been complaining that these people in basically neckbeards and camouflage and whatever who were unarmed almost overthrew the government by overpowering the Capitol police officers or being let into the Capitol building by the Capitol police and taking pictures and stealing a laptop and all that. And they called it an organized insurrection that was the worst. I think they said it was the worst political violence since the Civil War, right? So I think to some degree, I think they've said, oh, this is worse than 9/11, things like that. But you don't need the Second Amendment. At the same time, listen to this. At the same time that these people almost overthrew the government unarmed, that's what they're saying. The Second Amendment is useless because in order to overthrow the government, you need sophisticated jet weaponry, jet fighters, and nuclear weapons. So that's his premise here. Speaking at the White House in late afternoon, Biden said the Second Amendment, from the day it was passed, limited the type of people who could own a gun and what type of weapon you could own. You couldn't buy a cannon. Those who say the blood of patriots, all the stuff about how we're going to have to move against the government. Well, the tree of liberty has not been watered with the blood of patriots. What's happened is that there have never been, if you want to think you need to have weapons to take on the government, you need F-15s and maybe some nuclear weapons. Biden continued, the point is that there has always been the ability to limit rationally the type of weapon that can be owned and who can own it. We're not changing the Constitution, we're enforcing it, he added. The Second Amendment, which reads, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, is one of the most commonly cited amendments in the U.S. This amendment has been interpreted as the right to have a military and as the right for every American to own a gun, regardless of the circumstances. So there's two ways I think that you can interpret this quote, both of which reflect poorly on Biden. The first one is that you can't do anything to stop us. We have the nukes and we have the jets, and you're done. If you raise your hand against us, the entire U.S. government and its war machine will come down against you. That reflects badly on Biden because he's saying, well, your rights and the rights. And he also said that, by the way, none of the amendments are absolute, right? Let's look at the language it has. It says, 1 second. There was another. Here you go.
Own them. And I might add, the Second Amendment from the day it was passed limited the type of people who could own a gun and what type of weapon you could own. You couldn't buy.
So that's another lie. If it was passed in the 1790s, the Second Amendment here in the U.S., and I know some of you who don't live here in the U.S., you find this talk of the Second Amendment like you don't care because you don't have the right to own a weapon. but we care deeply here in the U.S. And I can say that even if I live in a very, very blue area, and I know a lot of people who are blue area, meaning Democrat, if you're not from the U.S. There are many people here in my area who are owners of firearms. And there are more people every day who are owners of firearms. And therefore, Joe Biden is for him to lie in such a transparent way, it's a wonder that the media is able to keep such a tight lid on many of the people who continue to believe in them. Because if this were true, there would be a list. If this were true that the Second Amendment from the beginning it limited the type of weapon you could buy and who could buy it, then that would have been evident. There would have been lists of those dating from the 1790s. In reality, the limitations on firearms ownership, gun control, they started after the Civil War. They started because there were many freedmen, many former black slaves who were going throughout the U.S. They were being harassed by gangs of racist people, former Confederates, the original KKK, and they were buying firearms, right? And it was used in order to prohibit those people from owning firearms, okay? And that was the Cruikshank decision. Styx Hexenhammer discusses this a lot in his videos. So yes, Joe Biden is like shamelessly lying about the Second Amendment.
Canon, those who say the blood of patriots, and all the stuff about how we're going to have to move against the government. Well, the tree of liberty is not water with the blood of patriots. What's happened is that there never been, if you want to think you need to have weapons to take on the government, you need F-15s and maybe some nuclear weapons. The point is that.
So what he's saying is that if you want to take on the government, if you think the government is tyrannical, you're going to need nuclear weapons. You're going to need F-15s. And I don't think that it's really feasible for people to create their own F-15. I think that's actually a dumb comment on Biden's part, because you would still be one F-15 against an entire Air Force. But he does know, because of the whole war on terror and all that entire era, nuclear weapons, yes, people have tried to create suitcase nuclear weapons, ones that can be detonated, terrorists, right? And he's basically messaging to them, if you want to overthrow us and you think that we're tyrants, you're going to need to do this. So that's the second way I'm interpreting it. The first way is that we have the weapons and you don't. The second way that you can interpret it is that, well, if you really think that we're tyrants, you have to do some sort of mass casualty event. So that's basically my take on Joe Biden and his idiotic viewpoint on the Second Amendment. So we're going to move on to the next segment. Just one moment. So as promised, I am going, and I was talking to somebody offline, that's why I'm saying as promised. We are going to talk a little bit about the Steven Crowder and H3H3 Productions feud, along with Sam Cedar being dragged into it, and really my interpretation of it, my viewpoint on this as somebody who has been part of debates in the past, and who I think was really in the wrong here. I don't think it's going to surprise anyone, but I'm just going to add my perspective as somebody who has experience with the whole debate me bro thing. You could say I've been a debate me bro, right? And I think that the debate me bro thing has started to become tired and old and everything. So basically what had happened was that Ethan Klein and Steven Crowder were trading barbs over whether you should trust the CDC. Ethan Klein's position had been that you don't need to question what's going on with the coronavirus restrictions, because there are experts at the CDC who tell you what to do. So you questioning them is basically you inserting your own limited scope of knowledge into something that requires very expert level knowledge. And I totally disagree with that viewpoint, but it is a viewpoint that's very common in the U.S. and in many states, people are still, by the way, against expert advice, saying, they're still wearing masks after having taken the vaccine, or they're going everywhere with masks. They're masking their children, even though it's not been revealed that masks may actually, keep pathogens that are harmful on children, because they've done. I think it was a study that was done in Florida, if I'm not mistaken. There are these masks that they end up becoming basically petri dishes. So they still do it because they've been indoctrinated into this cult of health and safety. I've never understood it. I've basically known for a while that the whole mask thing is largely a way to initiate social control. But Steven Crowder and Ethan Klein started to trade barbs because, yes, Steven Crowder started to say, all of these things that the CDC has been saying, they've contradicted themselves over and over again. They've changed their guidelines. They've reversed themselves. They reversed themselves on the masks. They've reversed themselves on ivermectin now. They reversed themselves before on the usefulness of the hydroxychloroquine and zinc cocktail. So there's no reason to really trust what they're saying, because they're continually reversing their position on every given issue. So this is how it went down. It was very interesting. And I'm going to play the video, actually.
Played well with those, but not the exclusively designed Skype TX box that we paid whatever premium for.
Yeah,
so.
Skype, I don't...
So this is during their actual sound check, and then you see what happens when the debate is supposed to start.
Trust Skype. Skype has always sucked.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll just.
Okay. So we're gonna record it, and then the topics are just like we said about authority with the vaccine, and there was something else you mentioned. I don't know how on
well,
topic
I just
you want
thought,
to keep it.
yeah, however you want to do it. I thought that since that was kind of the subject that got us into a tiff, that we could talk about sort of the CDC, sort of, medical authorities, and you can tell me where you disagree with me, and then also kind of big tech, because that ties in, with the CDC and World Health Organization. And I'll just sort of.
So this is them before the debate agreeing to the parameters of the discussion.
I'll introduce it to my, I have a little bit of a different audience, to let them know kind of who you are, what's going on, and if you want to do the same, that's fine. But
yeah, of course, okay. We'll let them know.
All right.
Okay.
I will go. And
all right.
I'll give you a countdown, and then I'll 3, 2. All right. Okay. I'm really glad to have my next guest on the show.
Okay. So now the debate has started. He puts on the screen start of the show.
Oh, and I've always said this. I always respect people who enter into the arena. And, we've had a lot of debates on this show, which is different from like a Change My Mind, where we sit down and have conversations. But my old Brazilian jiu-jitsu coach always said, if you come a switch, we go switch. You go spicy, we're going to do a little spicy. So we always try and keep it as respectful as possible. And I really do appreciate the guy making the time, because a lot of people has a huge YouTube channel, several YouTube channels, one of the OGs. A lot of people watch him. You know him. Some of you like him. Some of you don't. Same can be said for me. Ethan Klein from H3H3. Ethan, thanks, man, for making the time.
You're very welcome. And I just want to say, I know you called me, you said that I would be a layup.
I think I used something like that. Yeah.
And I think you're right, because I don't think I'm a very good debater. I think you know that. So I didn't want to make it too easy for you.
Oh, okay.
So I've prepared.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So what we were going to talk about is the initial quote that happened. I think he's looking off there. The initial quote that kind of was turned into.
So at this point, you see the other half of the screen's filled by Sam Cedar, who's this pundit from. He has his own show called The Majority Report. It's part of the TOIT group. They've also been part of Air America.
A little bit of a meme, which wasn't intentional, and was you saying you don't even have to think about it regarding the CDC. And I disagree with that. I think people should think about it. I believe, and we talked about this through Playful Ribbing, in an aggregation of medical authorities and scientific voices to make an informed and rational decision. So where do you think that I'm wrong on that?
Stephen, do you know that the Spartans are like practice man love with children.
Oh, geez. Okay, so this is what's going to happen. What did I tell you? He was going to do anything he could to avoid. Oh, there he is. Oh no, Sam Cedar. What a f***ing nightmare.
Thank you, Stephen.
I had no idea this was going to happen. I thought Ethan was a stand-up guy. This is where we are. Yeah, well, I told Dave. Remember I told you? I said I guarantee you he's going to do anything he can to avoid the debate.
Oh, I just think he believes that he should debate you.
No, he doesn't. He just takes advantage of women with, mental health issues. Ethan Klein doesn't stand up and do his own fighting.
I got to say,
it's just hilarious. Let's bring on FM.
That you would do anything to avoid talking to me. I think the point.
Does that include Joe Rogan?
Yeah, Joe Rogan and Dave Rubin and Jordan Peterson and Noam Chomsky and Sam Harris. Everyone's been avoiding.
And not just attempting to get your audience by jumping in.
Well, I debated with Charlie Kirk. Stephen, I mean, it's about issues.
It's about issues, yeah.
About those issues.
That's what you're doing here.
Some valid points.
You're so clever. I had no idea.
So they go on it. I think Sam Cedar remained on the stream for maybe 2 minutes, but basically Crowder started to throw in like full-on insults at Sam Cedar, and the way it was characterized in the media, which is really ironic, is so this is from the Business Insider. So Business Insider is actually pretty left-wing. And it says, so conservative pundit Steven Crowder flees a surprise debate with left-leaning YouTuber Sam Cedar. Now, Sylar says Klein is Jewish. Enough said. Well, so Sam Cedar. What's the difference? So Sylar, I knew that this is like where you would take it, because that's why I said that the Juminati stream. It's very interesting that Ophir would want you there, because you're probably like the opposite of the type of person that they are looking for. But in any case, conservative commentator Steven Crowder fled a debate with the left-leaning pundit Sam Cedar. Well, that's not the correct way to characterize it. First of all, so they're saying that Crowder made it into Twitter's top 10 trending search terms on Tuesday, with many viewers criticizing Crowder for fleeing the debate with Cedar, who surprised Crowder during a Zoom debate with YouTuber Ethan Klein of H3H3 Productions. Well, there's all you need to know. You're not supposed to... if you set up a debate and there's one person who you're going to debate, and you've set up terms and parameters around that person, and you're expecting them to be there and defend their position, and then they weasel out and put somebody else in, well, is that person bound by the same rules that you set up at the beginning? You don't know that. They could very well just, they could just say, well, that was the other person's terms. That was Ethan Klein's terms, H3H3's. It's not our fault that he didn't have the balls to debate you, and that's really why this became an issue of the Debate Me Bros. Now there are people on the right. For example, Nick Fuentes, I watched his video from band.video, where he was saying, well, this is the circle being completed. The people like Ben Shapiro, people like Steven Crowder, Dave Rubin, many times they in the past, they did say that they want to debate people. They were Debate Me Bros and everything like that. I understand that. I understand that criticism, but it's wrong in this case on Nick Fuentes' part, because Crowder had agreed to debate Ethan Klein. The parameters of the debate were with Ethan Klein. The parameters were not with Sam Cedar. I had a debate a while ago, and I actually think about it very often, because it was probably one of the moments that I invested so much time in, so much research. It was the debate over the 9/11 dancing Israeli theory. And I was talking to a guy named Ryan Dawson, who happens to be one of the biggest proponents of that theory. I worked very hard to prepare for it, and I faced him, and I believe if you watch the debate, you can tell he can't really defend his position. But he also made a major mistake by agreeing to the debate. And the major mistake is that he believed that he could win a debate with any person, even if he doesn't know what that person's position is. even if he doesn't know who he is, even if he doesn't know any of the past statements of that person, because he was so sure that only he has the knowledge and perspective of it. And Ryan Dawson came into the debate. He was very poorly prepared. He later said that he had been drinking the night before and that he he'd forgotten that it was happening. He joined at the last minute because he remembered at the last minute. And he made a lot of excuses for why he didn't perform well. I don't think that if he had preparation time, he would have performed better. But he made a lot of mistakes. First of all, by agreeing to the debate with somebody he didn't know, me. And then also not preparing enough. But he had the ground rules in front of him. He decided, and that's really the issue here. You should, before you debate someone, know as much about their position as possible in order to avoid making straw man arguments and accusing them of saying things that are not their position. And Ethan Klein, he was the person that Steven Crowder was supposed to debate. He had the public position. It wasn't Sam Seder talking to Steven Crowder regarding this, or even if it was, nobody even, like, who cares what Sam Seder says about the topic? If I'm in an argument with you and you bring in, because you feel so weak about your ability to argue your side, that you bring in somebody randomly off the street and that person is now in place of you, that proves that you're the real coward. And I think that this solidifies an impression of Ethan Klein that I wouldn't have had before, because I didn't really know that much about him. I've always thought he's kind of just one of these joke channels. I've never really understood his appeal. I think it's like mostly stoner humor and things like that. And it never really dawned on me why he's such a popular YouTuber, right? And the other thing is, so the quartering, this you might find interesting. So the quartering, Jeremy Hambley later challenged him to a debate, doing the whole debate me bro thing. And he basically used the same logic to say, oh, Ethan Klein refuses my debate. He's so it's using the same logic, right? But then he also exposed a lot of areas where Ethan Klein in the past, because he's called Steven Crowder a bigot, he's called him a racist and all of that. Well, here are some quotes of him of his from the past.
Bigot, bro. They're like these huge black dudes, and they're all strapped. They were all black.
I don't even pay attention to color or anything.
If there's 8 dudes on security and they're all black, I think that's worth noting.
I just noticed their suits. They were all wearing suits.
They were all wearing suits, yeah. No, they were super professional.
That was nice.
I mean, they were all like...
So the woman in the stream is Hila Klein, who's Ethan's wife.
6'5", black dudes. Yeah, that's terrifying. Is a 6'5" black dude scare you more than a 6'5" white dude?
No. Is it supposed to?
Yeah. How do I get out of this?
He's holding what looks like a phallic object, a little 8-year-old girl, and a big, giant black man looking in on her, man. It's like Blackzilla. This guy's got a weird fantasy, dude. Blackzilla raped a little 8-year-old white girl with blonde hair. Likes it. Likes him white and blonde.
Nigger faggot horde. It's just a wonderful string of words that really gets you going. It's like mouth silk.
What are you, gay?
Nothing gay,
what
no.
are you, gay, Hila?
No.
Fuck you, nigger faggot.
More black and vibrant and beautiful than ever.
Nigger faggot. Nice socks faggot.
That really just kind of, like, you're reaching for all these words, right? And you're like, oh, let me just like a
nigger faggot.
And aren't all Indians the goofiest people you've ever met in your life?
Fuck you, nigger faggot.
He's like killing niggas.
Oh my god, you look scary.
The guy's just such a fucking hateful bigot, bro.
So I was hoping, that Ethan and I could get together, maybe bring in a third party. It's obviously would be kind of cringe, like 2 white guys talking about why he has such a problem with black folks. But
so the quartering, I think, is one of the. I actually love his channel because it's entertaining. Usually I happen to agree with him. He's actually a very, both in terms of his reviews of movies and reviews of TV shows, and also his political commentary. I think he's one of the better people out there. So yeah, he put together that supercut, or his team did, of all these offensive things that Ethan Klein has put together. And all these people on the left who are defending Ethan Klein, how can they stand behind somebody who's said so many offensive things for so many years? And he's done it on YouTube, and YouTube apparently has not taken it down. Should he be canceled from YouTube according to their standards? That's the real question. It's always these people like Ethan Klein. For many years, he was an edgelord. He was always making fun of SJWs. Now he kisses their ass. When will these people learn that memories are long on the internet anger universe, right? Internet rage has a very long memory. That's what I'm basically trying to say. Didn't say it very articulately. Anyway, last topic for today. So, Joey Behar, Ethan is gross. Is his wife still part of the show? I'm sure that she is. The last topic of the show is going to be Joey Behar made a hacky, inappropriate joke about Carl Nassib on The View and tried to walk it back. So for those of you that don't know, if you're not American, if you're in a foreign country or whatever, there was this announcement this week that Carl Nassib, who is a defensive lineman in the NFL, he plays for the Vegas Raiders. He announced that he is openly gay. And a couple of days later, which was after what we're talking about here, somebody leaked that he was a registered Republican. And I think that person might have even been a Republican, which led to him being canceled by all the people who only 2 days earlier had been celebrating him as this pioneer and basically this big, courageous person for coming out in the NFL. Now, Joey Behar made this comment.
Las Vegas.
Okay.
The Las Vegas Raiders.
Anna, after they said penetration in the end zone, they lost me. So, Sonny, is this a sign that this... Sonny.
Las Vegas.
So all of the co-hosts besides Meghan McCain laughed, and I think it actually is... I wouldn't say it's the funniest joke that you can make, but it was a little bit more original, because most people would make a joke like that he's moving over to tight end, which is the one that I made when I first heard about it. But certainly, like, penetration in the end zone isn't really a common football phrase anyway. So it was a lame attempt at a football joke that also happened to be anti-gay. And here she is trying to walk it back.
I just long for the days when you can just be gay in the world, and it doesn't become a big deal. By the way, that inappropriate joke I made for daytime television, scratch it. Make believe I never said it. We'll be right back.
So it's the same attitude, just like Ethan Klein. Joey Behar is saying, well, that inappropriate thing that I said before, just pretend that I never said it. That's their attitude, because they don't want to be held to the standard that they hold society to. And that's really what I think is the perfect capture of how the behavior of these people goes when they're caught doing something that they themselves would hold people to be incredibly bigoted and evil for. Justin Barragana, by the way, who highlighted this, he's also somebody who, just to be clear, once apologized to Tucker Carlson for accusing him of photoshopping an AOC picture for having googly eyes. Anyway, I am going to give my perspective on the Carl Nassib situation. So, I've never been a supporter of the gay community, the LGBT community, and Pride Month and all that crap. I think that it is ruining media, it's ruining culture, it's ruining society. and I think it's all unhealthy lifestyles. And I think that those people who subscribe to those lifestyles, first of all, they have constitutional rights that allow them to do it. It doesn't mean that we have to basically bow down to them and pretend like they're these amazing, amazing people that are breaking barriers all the time. All the barriers to gay people being able to succeed in the U.S., they've been gone for many years. And the removal of the Defense of Marriage Act in 2015, that was the last real legal obstacle that they were subject to. And since then, instead of saying, well, we've arrived, we can just go back to living the normal lives that we were always saying we want to lead. Instead, they're largely spending all of their time trying to impose their lifestyles on other people. Now, as far as Carl Nassib, I think that's a separate issue, because Carl Nassib, he's not responsible to people like me. He's I'm just a casual NFL fan. I'm not even a Raiders fan. You can see I'm actually wearing a Dak Prescott shirt because I'm a Cowboys fan. He's only responsible for his actions to the coaches and the players of the Raiders, his teammates. And if they have no problem having him play on the team and being part of their organization, and they like his performance on the field, which is what's really important, I don't think it really matters whether he's gay or not, because in the end, the NFL is a very performance-driven sport. If you play well, if in this case he's a defensive end, if he gets pressure on the quarterback, if he is able to stop running backs from getting loose and getting into holes in the line, that's really his performance criteria. It's not whether he is in a relationship with one person or another. And I think that, for him, it was probably important because if you are gay in one of these situations where you're on a team, it's a very hyper-masculine sport, football. If people know that, you might be nervous because you might become the subject of a lot of ridicule by people because, yes, people who are in locker rooms, that there's a lot of very hot talk about sexuality and about different things that people do on their spare time. So I do respect how difficult the decision was for him to do it personally, but I don't think it was this major social moment where everything changed and the NFL suddenly became something new and everything, and we're a better society for it. So with that being said, I think Joy Behar is absolutely, she's a terrible coward. I think that based on her own standards, she shouldn't be on TV, but I think you should be able to crack jokes about Carl Nassib because we should have a free society. Unfortunately, most people like Joy Behar don't believe in those things. So her walk back, her acknowledgement that she said something that was wrong, it just shows that she's a fake person. It shows that she doesn't know how to balance her public views from the way that she really treats people. And it's the same thing as with Ellen DeGeneres, who pretends to be this very nice person on the air and in reality just bosses people around. It's the same idea. So that's about it. Ophir says, I need a dog filter. Well, what am I going to do? He's been wandering around for hours. So that's about it. Please like, share, and subscribe. I will try to upload some of these clips to BitChute, Rumble, and Odyssey. And I'll talk to you guys later. And some of you I'll probably talk to offline. Have a great day.
She used to In the lowlands of Cregan there lives a white hare, as swift as the swallow that flies through the air. You may trap the world over, but none to compare to the pride of old Cregan, that bonny white hare. One clear autumn morning, as ye will suppose, oh, the red golden sun o'er the green mountain rose. Barney Conway came down and he did declare, well, this day I'll put an end to the bonny white hare. So he searched through the lowlands and down through the glens, all among the wild ditches where the white hare did ends, till at last coming down over the heather so fair, from behind the wild thistle out jumps the white hare. Bang, bang went his guns and his dogs he slipped to, as swift as the wind o'er the green mountain flew. But his dogs soon came back and it made Barney sigh, for he knew that the white hare
And I want to emphasize that the goal of our
and we're some jolly sportsmen down here from Pomeroy, from Cookstown, Dungannon, and likewise the Moy. With our pedigree greyhounds we travel from far, and we come down to Cregan in our fine motor car. Oh, well, into the lowlands these huntsmen did go, in search of the white hare they'd look high and low, till at last Barney Conway from a bog bank so rare shouted out to the huntsmen, there lies the white hare. So they called up their greyhounds from off the green lea, Barney and the huntsmen all jammed tight with glee. It was there on the bog bank all gathered around, 7 dogs and 9 men did that poor hare surround. Oh, no wonder that the white hare did tremble with fear, as she stood on her hind legs she would raise her big ears. As she stood on her hind legs with one gallant spring, she jumped over the greyhounds and broke through the ring. Well, that she as it went on, it was a beautiful view, as swift as the wind o'er the green mountain flew. But those pedigree greyhounds, they didn't run far,